Young man humiliates a humble old man at the supermarket, only to be surprised when he learns the man's true identity. Ethan wandered through the crowded supermarket, the fluorescent lights buzzing above him. The scent of fresh produce mixed with the sounds of carts rolling and shoppers chatting. But for Ethan, the atmosphere felt heavy. Each aisle he walked down seemed to echo the pressure of his family's expectations. "Find a job, Ethan," they had said. "You need to do something with your life." He felt lost among the shelves, searching not just for groceries, but for a sense of direction. As he turned into aisle 5, something caught his eye. An elderly man, Harold, stood there with a pile of coupons in his hands. His clothes were old and worn, and he seemed to struggle with the crumpled pieces of paper. Ethan's lips curled into a smirk. "Look at that guy," he thought, an idea sparking in his mind. He could use this moment to entertain himself and those around him. "Hey, Grandpa," Ethan called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Need some help with those ancient coupons?" Laughter erupted from nearby shoppers, their eyes darting toward Harold. Ethan felt a rush of false superiority, the kind that came from tearing someone else down. "Maybe you should just put those back and buy something that's not expired." Harold, instead of snapping back, merely looked up with a quiet dignity. His eyes held a flicker of sadness, a hint of a story untold. For a moment, the laughter faded, and the aisle felt heavy with unspoken words. Ethan, however, was too caught up in the moment to notice. "What a loser," he thought, feeling a thrill as the laughter continued to echo around him. But as the shoppers moved past, some shaking their heads in disdain, Ethan felt a twinge of uncertainty. Was it really that funny? He wondered. The laughter felt hollow, and he glanced back at Harold. The old man's expression was not one of anger, but rather a quiet acceptance of the ridicule. Something about that look tugged at Ethan's conscience, but he quickly brushed it aside. The moment was too good to waste. As he walked away, Ethan felt high on the thrill of the encounter. "I showed him," he thought, but even as he reveled in his perceived victory, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts. What if he has a story? But he shook his head, dismissing the thought. He didn't want to think about that. He was the one in control, the one with the laughter. Later that day, Ethan found himself at home, the day's events replaying in his mind. He distracted himself with his phone, scrolling through social media, when something caught his eye, a newspaper article. The headline read, "Anonymous Philanthropist Changes Lives in the Community." Curiosity piqued, he clicked on it. As he read, his heart sank. The article detailed the life of Harold, the man he had mocked just hours earlier. It spoke of his achievements, his charity work, and how he had positively impacted thousands of lives. Ethan's mouth went dry. "No way," he muttered, his heart racing. The man he had ridiculed was a respected figure in the community, someone who had dedicated his life to helping others. Shock washed over him, quickly followed by a wave of shame. How could he have made a fool of himself at the expense of someone so influential? Memories of his own insecurities flooded back. Times he had felt small, overlooked, and belittled. In that moment, bitter regret took root in his heart. What have I done? He thought, grappling with the reality of his actions. Ethan tossed his phone aside, the laughter from earlier now haunting him. The image of Harold's sad eyes lingered in his mind, a reminder of the pain he had caused. He felt a growing urgency to make things right, as if redemption was calling out to him. "I need to find him," he whispered to himself, determination replacing the arrogance that had once clouded his judgment. The encounter in aisle 5 changed everything. Later that day, Ethan found himself sitting at the small table in his cramped apartment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. He absent-mindedly flipped through the pages of a newspaper that lay on the table, his mind still replaying the events of the supermarket. Suddenly, an article caught his eye. The headline read, "Anonymous Philanthropist Changes Lives in Our Community." Curious, he leaned closer to read. As he scanned the article, his heart sank. The piece detailed the incredible work of a man who had quietly donated large sums of money to help those in need. Who could this be? Ethan wondered. Then, as he continued reading, his breath caught in his throat. The article revealed that the philanthropist was none other than Harold, the elderly man he had mocked just hours before. Ethan's eyes widened as he absorbed the words. Harold was not just a frail old man struggling with coupons. He was a respected figure in the community. The article spoke of Harold's charity that provided food and shelter to thousands of families. It highlighted his dedication and the countless lives he had improved through his selfless acts. No way, Ethan muttered to himself, disbelief washing over him. He felt a cold wave of shame creep into his chest. How could he have laughed at someone so influential? The laughter he had thought would elevate him now felt like a heavy weight dragging him down. He put the newspaper down, his thoughts racing. Memories of his own insecurities began to surface. He recalled how he often felt overshadowed by the success of others, how he craved validation from his peers. "What was I thinking?" he whispered, running a hand through his hair. "I made fun of a man who was doing so much good." His phone buzzed on the table, breaking his spiral of guilt. It was a message from his friend Jake. "Hey man, want to grab a drink later?" it read. Ethan stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and regret. He didn't want to go out and pretend everything was fine. He needed to confront what he had done. "No, I can't," he typed back quickly. "I'm not feeling great." After sending the message, he leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the wall. The image of Harold's sad, yet dignified face played in his mind. A man who had quietly endured his humiliation while carrying the weight of his good deeds. Ethan felt a wave of guilt wash over him, stronger than before. "I need to make this right," he thought. The evening wore on, and Ethan tossed and turned in bed, unable to shake the feeling of remorse. He remembered how Harold had looked, so small and vulnerable, yet there was a strength in his silence. What if he's used to people making fun of him? Ethan wondered, his heart aching at the thought. What if no one has ever cared enough to see him for who he really is? He recalled a time when he himself felt that way, back in high school. The whispers behind his back and the laughter that echoed in the hallways had left him feeling isolated. Why did I think it was okay to treat someone else like that? He asked himself, frustration bubbling inside. As the clock ticked away, Ethan realized he couldn't let this moment pass. He needed to find Harold and apologize. He deserves better, Ethan thought, determination replacing his guilt. The idea of facing Harold was daunting, but he understood that true strength lay in acknowledging one's mistakes. Tomorrow, I'll go to him, he resolved. I have to tell him I'm sorry. With that final thought, Ethan finally drifted off to sleep, his mind still racing, but now filled with a sense of purpose. He knew that he had a long way to go, but this was the first step toward understanding and redemption. Ethan spent many sleepless nights, lying in bed with his thoughts racing. The image of Harold's hurt expression replayed in his mind like an old movie stuck on repeat. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the way Harold had looked, quietly suffering as Ethan laughed at him in the supermarket. The weight of his actions settled heavily on Ethan's chest, making it hard to breathe. Why did I do that? He whispered to himself one night, staring at the ceiling. What was I thinking? He turned on his side, pulling the blanket tighter around him as if it could shield him from his own shame. In those long hours, memories from his own life began to surface. He thought of the times he had felt small, moments when he had been made to feel less than others. There was the time in high school when he had stumbled in front of the entire class during a presentation, and the laughter that followed had echoed in his ears for weeks. I know how it feels to be ridiculed, he murmured, a bitter taste in his mouth. One afternoon, feeling overwhelmed by his thoughts, he met his friend Alex at a cafe. As they sat sipping coffee, Ethan could no longer hold back the weight of his guilt. I messed up, man, he said, running a hand through his hair. I made fun of this old guy at the store, and now I found out he's actually a big deal. He does so much for the community, and I treated him like a joke." Alex looked at him, concern etched on his face. "Ethan, we all make mistakes, but it sounds like you understand how wrong it was. That's the first step." "But it's more than that," Ethan replied, his voice rising. "I can't shake off the feeling that I'm a bad person. I thought it was funny, but now I see how cruel I was. I want to apologize to him, but what if he doesn't forgive me?" "True strength lies in kindness, not arrogance," Alex said, leaning forward. "If you genuinely want to make it right, then you should go and apologize. But you have to be sincere. It's not just about saying sorry, it's about understanding his pain." Ethan nodded, absorbing his friend's words. "You're right, I need to face this. I can't keep running from it." That night, Ethan sat down and wrote a letter. He poured out his feelings, explaining how ashamed he was and how much he wanted to make amends. After several drafts, he settled on a simple yet heartfelt message. He felt a flicker of hope as he thought of Harold's potential reaction. "I'll go find him tomorrow," he decided, feeling a mix of courage and fear. "I'll take him flowers. It's a small gesture, but it's a start." The next morning, Ethan woke up early, his heart pounding with anticipation. He picked out a bouquet of bright, cheerful flowers from a nearby shop, hoping they would convey his sincerity. As he walked toward Harold's home, he felt the butterflies in his stomach dance wildly. What if Harold didn't want to see him? What if he slammed the door in Ethan's face? But as he approached Harold's modest house, he took a deep breath and reminded himself of his intentions. "I just want to say I'm sorry," he whispered under his breath. He knocked on the door, his heart racing. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing Harold, who looked surprised to see Ethan standing there, flowers in hand. "Ethan," he said slowly, his brow furrowing. "What brings you here?" Ethan swallowed hard, the words caught in his throat. "Hi, Harold. I came to apologize. I'm really sorry for how I treated you in the store. I didn't know who you were, and I was cruel. You didn't deserve that." Harold studied Ethan's face, and for a moment, the silence stretched between them. "I appreciate your honesty," he finally replied, his voice steady yet soft. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. I just wanted you to know that I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm ashamed of myself," Ethan added, his voice trembling. "I didn't understand what I was doing. I'm truly sorry." Harold's expression softened. "Thank you, Ethan. I believe in the power of forgiveness. It's important for both of us to move forward." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Can we start over?" he asked, hopeful. Harold nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Yes, I think we can." As they stood there, the weight of their past slowly lifted, replaced by the promise of understanding and new beginnings. Ethan stood outside Harold's small, weathered home, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. He clutched a bouquet of flowers in his hands, their bright colors contrasting sharply with the dullness of the day. As he rehearsed the words he wanted to say in his mind, he felt the weight of his earlier actions pressing down on him. Today was the day he would make things right. Taking a deep breath, he approached the front door and knocked gently. The sound echoed in the quiet neighborhood, and he felt his heart race. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing Harold, who looked surprised to see Ethan on his doorstep. "Ethan." Harold's voice was cautious, his gray brows furrowing slightly. "What brings you here?" Ethan swallowed hard, his thoughts racing. "Harold, I came to apologize," he finally managed to say, his voice trembling. He held out the flowers, unsure if this gesture would be enough. "I know I hurt you the other day, and I'm really sorry." Harold looked at the flowers, then back to Ethan. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, mixed with caution. "You were quite rude, Ethan," he replied, his tone steady. "I don't think I can just forget that." "I know," Ethan said, his voice low. "I was awful. I was trying to impress others, and I didn't think about how my actions would affect you. I feel terrible." Harold studied Ethan for a moment, his expression softening. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," he said slowly. "But words alone aren't enough. You need to show you've learned from this." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of Harold's words. "I understand. I want to do better. I want to learn from you. If you'll let me." The older man hesitated, his gaze drifting to the flowers in Ethan's hands. "You know, forgiveness is a powerful thing," he said quietly. "But it must come from the heart. Why do you want to change?" Ethan took a deep breath, letting his emotions spill out. "I've been struggling with my own insecurities for a long time. I thought being funny or popular meant I had value, but now I see that I was just hiding behind a mask. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to help others, just like you do." Harold's features softened further, and he stepped aside, gesturing for Ethan to enter. "Come in then, let's talk." As Ethan stepped inside, he felt a wave of warmth envelop him. The cozy living room was filled with books and photographs, a glimpse into Harold's life. They sat down, and the atmosphere shifted from tension to something more vulnerable. "I've dedicated my life to helping others," Harold said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's not always easy, but it's rewarding. Do you know what charity work means to me?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't, but I want to learn. I want to understand how I can make a difference." Harold smiled faintly. "It's about connection. Seeing people for who they are, not judging them by their circumstances. It's easy to overlook the struggles of others, especially when we are caught up in our own lives." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he listened. He felt the weight of his past actions lifting slightly, replaced by a desire to change. "I've been blind," he admitted. "I want to see now. I want to help. Please, teach me." Harold nodded, his expression warm. "All right, Ethan, let's start with forgiveness. It's not just about saying sorry, it's about understanding and growing from our mistakes. Are you ready for that journey?" "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "I want to make it right." As they talked, both men found solace in their shared understanding. The emotional exchange opened a door between them, one that would lead to healing and growth. They both knew it would take time, but that was a journey worth taking together. Tears streamed down their faces, but this time they were tears of hope. In that moment, they began to build a bridge from the past, one step at a time. Ethan stood outside Harold's charity building, the sun shining brightly above him. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. After their heartfelt meeting, he had decided to volunteer at Harold's charity. The thought of making amends and learning from the man he once ridiculed filled him with purpose. As he stepped inside, the warm atmosphere enveloped him. The walls were decorated with photos of smiling families who had benefited from Harold's work. Ethan felt a pang of guilt at the memory of his earlier actions, but he quickly pushed it aside. Today was a new day. "Welcome, Ethan," a cheerful voice called out. It was Sarah, one of the charity's volunteers. She had a bright smile that made Ethan feel at ease. "We're so glad to have you here." "Thanks, Sarah," Ethan replied, returning her smile. "I'm really looking forward to helping out." As they walked through the bustling room filled with people sorting donations, Ethan could see the impact of their work firsthand. Families were receiving food and clothes, and the joy on their faces was undeniable. He felt a warmth in his heart that he had not felt in a long time. "Hey, Ethan," Sarah said, breaking his thoughts. "Are you ready for today's task? We need to organize the donations in the back." "Absolutely, just show me where to start," he said, eager to contribute. They moved to the back of the building, where boxes and bags filled with clothing and toys were piled high. Ethan picked up a box labeled "Children's Clothes" and began sorting through it. He found bright shirts and cute dresses, and with each item he touched, he imagined the children who would wear them. "You're doing great," Sarah encouraged, noticing Ethan's enthusiasm. "It's nice to see someone so eager to help." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of belonging. "I want to do my part. I've learned a lot from Harold already. Speaking of Harold, he's been looking for you, Sarah said, glancing toward the doorway. He wanted to show you something special. Ethan's heart raced. He had so much respect for Harold now. He followed Sarah to the front of the building, where Harold was talking to a group of volunteers. As he approached, Harold turned and smiled warmly. "Ethan, I'm glad you're here," Harold said, gesturing for him to join the group. "I wanted to share a new project we're starting." "Sure, what is it?" Ethan asked, curious. "We are launching a program to help underprivileged kids with school supplies. We want to ensure every child has what they need to succeed in school," Harold explained passionately. "It will take a lot of effort, but I believe we can make a difference." Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "That sounds amazing. How can I help?" Harold placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Your energy and fresh ideas are just what we need. Let's brainstorm ways to raise awareness and gather donations." As they discussed plans, Ethan felt a strong connection to the cause and to Harold. He realized how much he admired Harold's dedication and kindness. In that moment, he grasped the value of humility and service. A few days later, Ethan found himself immersed in the charity's work. He spent hours helping to organize events and promote the new school supply program. He met many people from the community and listened to their stories. Each interaction opened his eyes further to the struggles others faced. One afternoon, while sorting through supplies, Ethan overheard a conversation between two volunteers. "I don't know how we would manage without Harold," one said. "He has such a big heart." "Absolutely. He's a true inspiration," the other replied. "He's shown us all that kindness can change lives." Ethan nodded to himself, feeling a sense of pride in being part of this community. He had once thought he was above others, but now he understood that true worth came from lifting others up. Later, as he and Harold were packing school supplies, Ethan spoke up. "Harold, thank you for taking me under your wing. I've learned so much from you already." Harold paused and looked at Ethan with a knowing smile. "The journey is just beginning, Ethan. Remember, we all have the power to build bridges, not walls." Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. He was no longer the arrogant young man who had laughed at Harold. He was someone who wanted to make a difference, and with Harold's guidance, he knew he was on the right path. The sun was shining brightly on the day of the community event, a celebration organized by Harold's charity. The park was filled with colorful decorations, laughter, and the delicious smell of food from various stands. Ethan stood nervously at the entrance, clutching a microphone, waiting for Harold to arrive. He felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was not just another day, it was a chance to showcase how much he had changed. As the crowd began to gather, Ethan spotted Harold walking toward him. The elderly man wore a warm smile, dressed in a simple yet neat outfit that reflected his humble nature. "Ethan," Harold called out, waving his hand. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too, Harold," Ethan replied, feeling a rush of gratitude. "I've been looking forward to this." "Are you ready to share our story?" Harold asked, his eyes twinkling with kindness. Ethan took a deep breath. "I think so. I just hope I can express how much this all means to me." Harold placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Just speak from your heart. That's all anyone needs to hear." As the event kicked off, the energy in the park shifted. Children played games, and families gathered around to enjoy the festivities. Harold took the stage first, addressing the crowd with his gentle yet powerful voice. "Thank you all for being here today. This charity is not just about giving. It's about building connections and understanding each other as a community." Ethan watched Harold, feeling inspired. He could see the respect everyone had for him. After Harold's speech, it was Ethan's turn. He stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. The crowd's chatter faded, and all eyes were on him. "Hello, everyone," Ethan began, his voice steadying. "I want to share something very personal with you all. A while ago, I made a terrible mistake. I ridiculed someone I didn't understand. That person was Harold." He paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. At that time, I thought I was better than him. I thought I could impress others by making a joke at his expense. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some murmuring among themselves. Ethan continued. But then I learned the truth about Harold. He is not just an elderly man struggling with coupons. He is a philanthropist who has changed countless lives. I realized how wrong I was. A silence fell over the crowd as they absorbed his words. Ethan took another deep breath and glanced at Harold, who nodded encouragingly. I want to tell you all that true strength comes from kindness. I have spent time with Harold, and he has shown me what it means to give back to others and to treat everyone with respect. I am grateful for his forgiveness, and I want to be a better person because of it. As he spoke, Ethan felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. He saw nods of understanding from the audience, and some even smiled. I hope that my story can encourage you to think about how we treat each other. It's easy to judge someone at first glance, but we never know the struggles they are facing or the impact they have made. When he finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause. Ethan's heart swelled with emotion. Harold stepped up beside him, placing an arm around his shoulder. Thank you, Ethan. You have shown great courage today. As they stood together, the community began to applaud even louder. We need more kindness in our lives, someone shouted from the crowd. Let's support each other. Ethan looked out at the people around him, feeling a sense of belonging he had never felt before. He realized that they were all united by shared experiences and the hope for a better future. The atmosphere was charged with positivity, and he could see people starting to connect with one another, smiling and engaging in conversation. As the event continued, Ethan noticed families sharing stories, laughter echoing through the park. He felt proud to be part of this community, a community that valued empathy and understanding. With each passing moment, Ethan understood that this was just the beginning. He had begun a journey of growth and change, and he was excited to see where it would lead him. The future was bright, and he knew that he could continue to make a difference, one kind act at a time. Share this story if you believe that kindness can transform lives and build stronger communities. Leave a comment about a time when compassion changed your perspective, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Let's spread the message of empathy together.